because of who we are. We experience our careers differently, our lives differently, biologically we are different, expectations of men and women are different, boys and girls are different, and therefore the way we see the world, the way we see the problems, the way we approach problems is different from anyone. And that is true not just between man and woman, it would be true for different races as well, right? You know, someone from a different race, someone from a different country will approach a problem differently. And given that we are now living in a world which is changing so fast, customer preferences are changing so fast, technology is changing so fast. You know, just if you look at the languages, the way they are evolving, the solutions we are looking at, the kind of, you know, when I look at like the crypto and the blockchain world and the metaverses, I almost feel like there is a parallel world being created, just kind of the foundation, like 100 years ago, the foundation for trade and logistics and communication was set up with telephone lines and with railways and with highways. That is being done on the internet right now with blockchain, which is going to have an impact on our society, on politics, on how we communicate, how we trade, right? And therefore, it is in humanity's interest to get different perspectives. Women will be consumers of that. Women will be builders of that world. So just to say that one set of views, or we only bring in one set of working assumptions into some of these technologies as we build them, is actually very dangerous for humanity as a whole. And we do face many existential crises as a humanity. And it's the fact that 50% of the world is not participating in it is it's mind-boggling. It makes no sense to me at all. So you know, it is important that we take in the views, because they are large part of the customer base, they are large part of the engineering base. They, you know, as we see that STEM education, when it comes to education, going into college, almost 47% are women, right? And in some countries like the US, etc., it's over 50%. So these are women who are capable, who know, understand the technology, but we're not making use of their talents. So I think it is important for us, as humanity, as we do innovation, as we find new solutions, to figure out a way to involve this large percentage of well thinking, differently thinking people.
Lovely. Thanks, Pooja. That was a you articulated the key points really well. So over to you, Sari. I'm curious to hear from you as an entrepreneur who decided to start a community by women, for women, of women. So what are your insights? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think I'd like to think of this entire conversation actually as a political conversation. I mean, my strong view is if humanity lets inequality fester, it'll continue to fester. And we've seen different periods of history where unchecked, inequality has resulted in, right from slave trade to apartheid to and as recently as movements like Black Lives Matter. The truth is, I think human beings need incentives aligned, and I think somewhere this is also a question of aligning the incentives, which is a political job, and I have surely come to believe that yes, we definitely need a lot of initiatives and we need a lot of change makers, but we also need political consciousness that advocates equality for all. So I'm going to go back to Nordic countries. I mean, they've achieved a fair status of women in workforce and welfare state and parental leave and women in STEM. It didn't happen without the buy-in at the political level. So to me, at heart, this is a deeply political issue. But at the same time, I think the tools of change making are tech. So yes, legislation and policy plays a role, but all tools of change making are technologies now. They are not sitting as pieces of paper. They are being built either as stacks or rails or ecosystems. So let me give you an example. Till about 5 years ago, there was no conversation of women in venture. Okay, it was a zero conversation, and it started in the US, and now 30% of US venture capital is being led by women, or at least we are seeing that more and more women are investors. And what that does is it automatically opens gateways for more and more women to build companies. And more and more women building companies means that they are building different kind of companies. So I know a lot of our approach to equality has been, hey, ground up, but the truth is we can't let go of the fact that it's also driven by. And I think that's so this conversation is a way for us to enhance consciousness. It's to make sure that we don't forget it. A lot of people say, why are you having these conversations again and again? But the more you talk about it, the more it kind of multiplies. As a founder, like, I can totally tell you, when I first started Shiros, there was no conversation of women's internet. There was no idea of a women's stack. And why do women need a different stack? The truth is, a man is never going to need a period tracker in his life. A man's never going to give birth to children. The socio-political construct of our country is such that women have different needs. And much like our roads, internet is not built by women for women. It's built by men for themselves, and that's what it manifests. So what are the biggest categories of content on the internet? It's pornography, it's sports, it's stock market. Do you think it would be the same if women got here first? So building Shiros was to say, let's build an ecosystem of things that women want out of the internet. And that's what we've been doing. So we created a community that allows you to be. I think the biggest thing all women want, it doesn't matter who they are, what age they are, what economic status they are. Women don't want to be judged. We all have shoulder aches thanks to being judged all our lives. So we just want a day of not being judged, of our choices, of who we are. And secondly, we all want to grow. We want better health. We want better skills, education, income, access to opportunities, access to resources. So that's what we've done. We've said, hey, it's a safe space for everyone to come and hang out and just be. So there's really, like, a lot of people ask me, what's the takeaway? What do they get from Shiros? They get nothing. They can just be. And I think that itself is a great present, for a woman. And then, of course, we've created triggers of change in employment and entrepreneurship and access to capital. And those are sort of catalytic sort of, ways to trigger change. But at heart, I think we're living in a time where ecosystems matter. I mean, we all know big tech has their own ecosystem, Google has their own, Microsoft has their own, and Facebook has their own. We're saying women need their own ecosystem. So we're building this giant ecosystem that, that has a very large scale impact on this entire thesis, to say, let's make more room for women on the table.
That's very inspiring, Sari. And I just to sum up what all of you have said, that we have established that inclusion matters. It's an economic imperative, it's a cultural imperative, it's a political imperative, and as Pooja said, it's dangerous if we don't include women. So from here, we have set the stage beautifully. So let's look at some of the challenges that we face when it comes to inclusion, which start from the cradle to the C-suites, as I'd like to call it. Is there a culture of conditioning that prevents girls from dreaming big? Do we lack the confidence to assert ourselves? Is there an aspiration deficit? Actually, in India, we start well enough. The percentage of women grads, as Pooja pointed out, in STEM at the tertiary level is very high compared to even some of the other countries like US, UK, or Germany. We also do very well at the entry level. In the IT BPM sector, 51% of all candidates are women. But this becomes 25% at the managerial level. And by the time we reach a C-suite, it's less than 1%. So what happens from entry point to C-level execs? It is a curious mix of the three M's, as I'd like to put it. marriage, mobility, and maternity. There are also systemic biases that exist. So I would like to hear from each of you on what those biases are. How are you handling them? So each of you will have 2 to 3 minutes to share your views. Let's start with Damini. You had mentioned the pressure to represent and be correct despite all your education and your experience. So can you elaborate going from there?
Absolutely. I can definitely, talk a little bit about that. I feel like there's a very famous quote that that says, if a man fails, it's his individual failure. If a woman fails, all of womankind fails, right? And I think, that's one of the big things women face when we're in the tech fields is we're oftentimes the only woman in the room. And, when you're the only woman in the room, it becomes sometimes very hard to offer a dissenting opinion because all eyes are on you immediately. And, I say this as a privileged woman who had a, fantastic support system growing up, strong educational background, and I'm fairly confident in my skill set. But if it's intimidating for me to voice my dissenting opinion in a room that comprises of much older individuals that don't look like me, then you can imagine how hard it must be for someone that hasn't had that kind of a background, which is, a very large majority of women that are in STEM. So I think, it starts from there. It starts from, having to work twice as hard to make yourself heard. It continues from there where it's, where, where I think opportunities that are presented are not equally presented to both men and women once they're in the workforce. So, I'll draw a parallel to, when you're growing up, a soldering kit is typically not a present that, a woman child, girl child is given in school, right? Which means that let's say there's one family that does that. She enters college where there's maybe 100 boys who know how to solder for every one girl that knows how to solder at the entry point. And this happens throughout the women's journey in STEM, is that at every point of time we're already running behind because we haven't received the same access to opportunities. And I think that is the reason why you don't see the same kind of representation at the C-level in companies anymore.
Lovely, Ramni, and you raised a very interesting point about the freedom to explore and to fool around and tinker around with scientific kits early on. It's something that we overlook, but very key point that you made. Suchi, you talked about how it is a challenge to preserve your individuality while integrating within the professional community. So could you start with that and expand?
Yeah, I think it's a takeoff from this whole thing of being very different from the other people in the room. Sometimes I think the fact that we're discussing this problem is also actually a positive thing because there are more women now, and hence getting this right is very important. And without trying to claim any extra credit or anything, just the fact that I started in this industry many, many years back, it's 25 plus years, there were very few technologists itself. So whether you were male or female, didn't matter. You had to just prove yourself as a technologist. And I think that helped me get confident, helped me learn from my mistakes, etc. Because there wasn't that much of judging, if I can put it like that, right? There was judging, but there was judging more in terms of what are you delivering and not, as a woman engineer, do you have to deliver differently, etc. So I think that helped me find my individuality, and I had the confidence to keep my own style while I grew in the in this field. For me, one area that I think we really need to do a lot of active change is this whole definition of what do we mean by leadership? What do we mean by engineering? Those definitions to me still carry a lot of gender bias. Our traditional definition of leadership is all about charisma, about confidence. And there are lots of Harvard Business Review case studies that talk about confidence versus competence, charisma versus capability. And somewhere
uh, these characteristics have been associated with male personalities, I feel. And I think it's important to evolve gender neutral definitions of leadership, gender neutral definitions of technology roles that then start encouraging women to do that extra bit to succeed. Because over all this, marriage, mobility, maternity, this whole continuous judging, I completely agree with Sairi. I think it tires us out. And then we come to that point of making a choice. Is it worth the effort to do something that you deeply believe in? I mean, for all of us, I think we reach that point in our journey where something is very important for our own individuality, and to preserve that, we put that effort. And as the head of a technology center, as a head of a large organization, my continuous effort is to make this whole process very visible to everyone in the organization, because the whole thing about unconscious bias is it's unconscious. So the first thing we have to do is make that conscious, and then you work towards correcting it. And believe me, we as women have the same unconscious bias as do men. So I think part of the journey is just recognizing that this issue exists in us, exposing it, and then changing it. So I think those are things that I think more and more we need to do to create that um, exposure of role models within the organization, right? It's very circular. I completely agree with you, Anu, in terms of the intake we have of grads in our organization, 50-50, and we are doing way better than UK, US, Germany. They are. I'm a global. We are in a global organization, and I know the stats. But I think when they look up, they see very few like themselves. So then they wonder whether they need to change. And then the whole cycle changes, sets in, right? So if I have to change, can I sustain it? Is it worth the effort? So I think that's an area we need to do a lot more to address this inequality. And then we'll start seeing more and more people up the leadership chain. Thank you so much, Suchi. Lovely points, and I really appreciate the nuance that you caught on to about gender neutral definitions and all of that. So, Pooja, you'd mentioned this challenge of going from an all-girls school to IIT Delhi, and how no one from your family had gone to a professional college, and how it was a big leap. So, could you lead us on from there? How has your journey been?
So, Anu, I'll respond to your question in two parts. First part is around the whole conditioning, right? I think what is important to recognize is that it is not at an individual level that anybody is trying to discriminate against you. At least it's not, when I talk to my friends who are very progressive and liberal in their thinking, and they will basically say, look, Pooja, we are not going in to an interview saying, look, I don't want to hire a woman, I want to hire it's not. So I think that is the first thing to recognize, that it's not a personal attack on any one individual. There might be such people with very deep stereotypes and biases, but by and large, it is a systemic policy level challenge that exists, because it can't be done at a one-on-one level. If we kind of go around the room right now also, it at least I don't feel like anybody has actively picked on me. I feel like people have been generally supportive, men have been supportive, women have been supportive, but it's a systemic problem that we need to exist. And I'll say something controversial again, based on my experience, my conversations with my friends. I have friends, a lot of them from IIT Delhi, IIT Chennai, Bombay, Kharagpur. And one distinction I find is that women from IIT Chennai tend to be much more ambitious, driven. 30 years down the road, they are still very particular about continuing in their jobs at leadership positions, whereas in IT Delhi, I would see lesser of them. And I don't, and I've been having long discussions with different people on why that could be. And couple of things came out. One is in the South, what we saw, the political issue that Sairi raised. North has been politically attacked all the time, and women have been kind of at the receiving end of that. If you look at states like Haryana, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, you just see that, right? In South, you see grandmothers are educated. When I just generally see my friends, grandmothers are mostly educated compared to the North. And I think that makes a difference. Societal expectations of parents, relatives, friends saying, why are you quitting? I mean, at the time of maternity, take it slow, maybe go back. Versus saying, family comes first. You have to, you are a bad mother or a wife if you're not taking care of your family. And that kind of, you imbibe that guilt. You continue to absorb that, and that's what conditioning is. Again, nobody is doing that on purpose at an individual level, but that's the kind of socio-economic structure that you live in that forms that. And then the second thing I talk about is this power. So, you say this 3 M's. I'll say the power of three, which Damini and Suchi talked about. And again, this is through discussions with friends, which is, if you're the only woman in the room, it's okay. For some time, you kind of keep going on and on, but it's not as much fun. You can't do all the jokes that you want to do and something very specific to you as a woman and with your children. And, you can't do that, right? And building a career and getting to leadership is a long journey with a lot of hurdles, and, you have to be at it. So you need to have fun along the way. So what we've realized, again, is that there is power of three. If there is only one woman in the room, it's hard. If there is two, there is more, kind of, you are still trying to fit into the system. With 3 women, it gets much easier and much better environment. So whenever I'm talking to my friends, because diversity has become an issue now, right? A lot of companies are trying to make sure that there are women in leadership positions. I say not just one woman, power of three. And so I think that makes that's how I feel. And the third point I'll take from what Sari was talking about is ecosystem, where you feel comfortable at an adult. What we at an adult stage as women, we see that exactly at teenage years as well. Why did Women Who Code, like Reshma Sojani's initiative, work? And I spoke to many girls who were part of Women Who Code. One of the things that they said, we felt comfortable to fail. It was okay to make mistakes. When you're innovating, when you're building new things, you will make mistakes. You will fail. And you want to be in an ecosystem where you feel comfortable to fail, right? My daughter, she loves computer science. She loves building stuff. She didn't want to take computer science HR because there were only 2 other girls there, or actually no other girl there, because it was, so she said, okay, I'm okay with SR. So you begin to see these choices being made because there is no ecosystem. And it's not, again, I mentor a lot of boys in that they're not trying to do it at an individual level, but it's that ecosystem when you are there, that it's one girl or 2 girls who will feel uncomfortable failing. And therefore it's important to create these kind of structures which enable women to, or girls, to take risks.
Thanks, Pooja. The great point you raised about how it's conspiracy against women. I think that's something that, we need to bring to the table, and thanks for highlighting that. And good to hear about this power of 3 and the sisterhood of support and all that. So, interesting points. Sairi, I think when I discussed offline, you said that every day the challenge as a woman in tech, you didn't raise any particular challenge. So could you elaborate on that?
I think, first of all, the biggest challenge is that you're going to be outnumbered. So anything you say will have, a lot of pushback. And I think that's the biggest challenge. And I think, the second challenge is that, you have to be more judgment cast on it. It is not the norm. It's always the exception. So, and I think, and obviously, I think the other thing is, again, the power of numbers. Like for example, the tech industry is totally run by boys, right? Which means they're also deciding who gets the money, and where are we all spending our money? Gaming companies, ride hailing, food delivery, right? That's exactly what the world needs today, right? And we don't need, healthcare startups and education startups and like, so, and these waves come, right? We know these waves. These are all driven by this, and just imagine putting a hand up to say, no, no, maybe we should build communities. No, 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 we should build fintech for women. No, no, let's go and do something that is, is you know always going to be the exception, and I think it happens to women a lot. I see it in even in coding teams, right? There'll be 10 coders, there'll be maybe one woman sitting there, maybe two women in a team of 40 men. The numbers are always stacked against, so these women will end up sort of having their lunch together and doing their own little thing together, but it's really hard for them to break this cloud, and it happens everywhere. When I was young, I used to work for an industry body. Again, it was a big, here I am, a 23-year-old woman who's just beginning her career, but I'm not dumb. I read up, I'm aware on issues, and I have an opinion. But you know what? They're all 55-year-old men in blue suits, and so many of them, and then you're also outnumbered. This plays out a lot of times in our life. So one, this is a common trend. Second is, again, I think women just have to do thrice the work to get their point across. So, for example, and this is so common, like I even in let's say the venture business, the ideas that a 24-year-old founder from IIT brings versus a woman founder from Banaras, I think they're going to get two very different set of treatments. So once that, and second is, I think just the entire piece of having to do double the labor, and that's what tires us out. Yes, I mean, there is a reason why women drop out. There is a reason why women want to raise less money. There is a reason why women are happier building smaller companies, because it's just too much pain after a point in time. And I think my strong belief is that women who end up making it are massive exceptions. They are not there because the system sort of propped them up like it did for the boys. They're all there as exceptions, exceptions of all natures and resilience and all of that. And I think, and that speaks for itself, which means that we're not this it's not being optimized for scale at all, right? All the women who are making it, for example, Kiran Majumdar Shah. We have only one woman in biotech who is out there because reaching that scale is so hard that the next company is really going to have again, the curve is very steep, because and these are small things. These are not always big systemic things, that right from that lunch in that coding room to saying, hey, to pitching at a, let's say, an accelerator, or to even hiring, right? Like, we all are women who run strong companies. I mean, there is a bro network that we're not part of. There is a bro network that I can't hire from. I have to find my own playbook there. I have to build my own playbook for everything. And I think, yes, it is harder, but the truth is, these are nice heroic stories, but it's not good for business.
Your point is taken, Sally. I think, like a bro network, we need a cis network now, at least, 3 women at least, let's start with that. So we've all established that there are a lot of challenges. Now, how do we overcome these barriers? That's going to be the next segment. How can we, as individuals, as women leaders in our own domains, and as a society, overcome these specific challenges when it comes to women pursuing careers in STEM? So each of you will have 1 to 2 minutes to share your thoughts. I would like to hear about what is being done. Where do we begin? What can we do as caregivers to create to eliminate some unconscious biases? Can we create a sisterhood of support? What are some of the best practices from around the world that we can draw upon? So could you share real life examples and anecdotes that have been helpful in handling some of these challenges? And if one of you or all of you could talk about the role of skilling, reskilling, upskilling, in helping women along this journey. So Damini, can we hear from you?
Absolutely. I think this is a great question. And and to start with your last question first about upskilling, reskilling, I think it starts from a very young age with teaching kids how to advocate for themselves and teaching women specifically how to advocate for themselves. And I think that's what's helped me the most is that my parents taught me from a very early age to not be afraid of asking for what I need, especially if I need help. And I think this is where, women tend to hold themselves back more than men is that I mentored a lot of students at different universities, and if I'm in a group with a mix of both men and women, I'll find that all the men are jumping to ask questions about what they can do next in life, and women don't. And that's a problem. And I think that's one of the key things that we need to address is teach women how to advocate for themselves. And I think it becomes easier the more they see other women do this around them. So I think if I'm a good advocate for myself, the way I think I can also help other women around me on my team is to also advocate for them. If I see that they are not being heard the way they should be. In addition to that, I think another very important way of changing things is by paying it forward through mentorship. Going back to our respective education institutions, talking to the girls and women there and showing them that the paths that we've taken are open to others to adopt as well, and being open to answer their questions as they make the same journey. Because there really is no reason why they should have to figure things out for themselves when we've already gone through that process and figured some of those things out. And I think the last thing is more from a company diversity perspective is to try and recruit from a diverse pool of candidates. And if we don't see diverse candidates applying, question why that is the case. It's not because women are not interested. It's probably because of the way the job description is designed. Just from a personality perspective, women are less likely to apply for positions if they don't meet at least 90% of the criteria. If you ask this, if you show the same job description to an equally qualified man, as long as he checks about 50% of the boxes, he's probably going to apply for the job. And so a big change there is to make job descriptions less overwhelming, make them succinct, make them focused more on generic skill sets than very specific details. Which is what even we as a company would like to do, right? We're trying to hire an ideal candidate, but that oftentimes can be an obstacle to women entering the workforce or even considering themselves for the position.
Thanks, Damini. That was very informative, and I really would appreciate your point about paying it forward and teaching women to advocate for themselves, because I think it's the crux of the problem that we're talking about today. So Suchi, can you take it from here? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we're all kind of coming to this power of three. So at least in Deutsche, one of the things that I keep talking about are the 3 A's, awareness, advocacy, and then acceptance. And it's also something that I do in my personal life. I mean, self-aware is, half the journey, and then you do the whole change, and then you accept what you can't change, right? So the whole thing about job descriptions, I'm so glad this came up, because a lot of the work we do is to make those job descriptions gender neutral. And it is about highlighting softer skills. It is about highlighting those elements of adaptive leadership, right? I mean, we're all from tech to a certain extent. And, the whole concept of agile organizations, the concept of servant leadership, I think is actually beneficial for having diverse leaders or diverse people in the workforce, because it is not about one person, it's about enabling collective power of the team. And I think these things appeal to women, and we should highlight that in our job descriptions. That's a lot of work that we're doing collectively to put out job descriptions that appeal to people of all types. How do you create branding around
the kind of roles we have to offer. And it's not just about men or women. When we put things out as a global organization, you see a lot of Caucasian faces. You may see a few Hispanic faces, etc. How do you get that whole element out there of women and men and women of different cultural and ethnicity origins? That again starts projecting an inclusive workspace, right? And then people are comfortable applying there. So it starts from attracting diverse people. Now, once you're in the workplace, the whole thing of making people aware that these are subconscious or unconscious biases that come through, not with an intent to harm, but sometimes they actually think they're helping. And, Anu, we were discussing this today. Coincidentally, there's an article in the Indian Express Pune edition that kind of talks about this. This has actually happened to me as well. When I was working, my managers, extremely supportive and all male, they took decisions on my behalf, which I came to know later, which, maybe I wouldn't have taken. There was an opportunity to do something in a different city for a short period. And the decision was taken by a manager. Oh, how can you travel? You have a child at home, but that has to be my choice, right? So I think that bias is not always a negative bias. My manager honestly thought he was trying to help me. So I think we need to work on those elements within an organization to help women reach their own choices. Because I know we talk a lot about brotherhood and sisterhood. Actually, I think it should be a community with mixed representation, but we should be aware of our biases and then actively try to correct it. That then starts encouraging people to fail, because the whole thing of innovation is fail fast and try harder, right? So how do you create that culture? The other concept that I think is really important for organizations to think about is the concept of psychological safety. It's a concept that's come out because of Google's work around Project Aristotle. But I think it's a very important element of building, again, an inclusive culture where people are safe to be themselves, people feel safe to fail, people feel safe to try new things. And that, again, creates a more productive workplace and better solutions. So I think as an organization, policies, all those things have already happened. I mean, I feel organizations have gone past that. And now it's about tackling these aspects in our day-to-day interactions, in doing more around advocacy, doing more about acceptance, to encourage people to stay in the workforce, not drop out because it's too much effort to, try and succeed. So some of us have to do more. I completely agree. All this, we do mentoring, sponsoring, etc. But I think it is needed to get that critical mass, and then that critical mass will look after themselves. It's literally like a chain reaction, right? Once you hit that number, then the atoms multiply on their own. So I just wanted to make it a STEM kind of conversation. So I'm using these analogies, but I think we have to look beyond straightforward policy, etc. We actually look at how a company's culture is evolving to promote this kind of acceptance. Thanks a lot, Suchi. To add to your point, since you wanted to make it more scientific, your point about critical mass reminded me about, a very, very simple mathematical concept. I'm sure, all of you would have done this at some point. When you multiply 0.9, infinitely, it eventually tends to 0. If you multiply 1 infinitely, it leads to 1. But if you go a little above 1, a delta above 1, and you keep doing that, it goes to infinity. So the difference here we are talking about is, tending towards 0, tending towards 1, and tending towards infinity, all because there is a little bit of an effort. There is like that one small step, that one extra leap. So going beyond the bare minimum, if you're still at 1 and you're still doing what is required, we are never going to get that critical mass. So if you go beyond that, a delta change can make so much of a difference and lead us to, infinity as opposed to staying in the same place. So, Pooja, can we hear from you on this? All of the
Sure.
panelists have been expressing very, very interesting points, and I'm losing track of time because I'm getting caught up in your mesmerizing descriptions. So let's get on with you, Pooja.
Yes. I think that power of compounding that you talked about absolutely makes sense. I have 3 or 4 small things to add to this bucket of solutions. First is um, vocabulary. Just having the vocabulary to talk about it, right? And I again say from my personal experience, the first 10, 15 years of my career, it was like putting blinders on and believing that everything is meritocratic and you work hard, and so there are no biases, just like the image you showed, and that I can manage it all, and it's like nobody is trying to. So I it took me some time, and it was conversations with friends, reflection, reading to build the vocabulary to address it. Before that, it was like, okay, I'm as good as another person in the room, and I'm not facing any kind of discrimination. The second thing is speaking up. I thought a lot about, I won't speak too much about it. You see some of these small things and you just say, okay, this is how it works. You just have to keep doing your work. But I think in the last decade, especially as my 2 girls are growing up, I've made it a point to speak up whenever I want to, and whenever I see an issue, because I feel like Damini said, we owe it to the next generation, that some of the battles we fought, we are standing on the shoulders of men, women who came before us, and we have to do the same for the next generation. And I'll give you an example. I'm an angel investor, and I invest in largely women-led. I'm actually not an angel investor. I only invest in women-led companies. So there was this. They had sent me the term sheet and the document to sign, and asked for my name, PAN card, address, and I sent it to them. And just day before yesterday, they sent back an email saying, Pooja, we will need to know your father's name as well. And I was like, why would you need to know my father's or my husband's name for me to be able to invest in this? And this other friend who's a co-investor in this, she said, I've been the primary earner, but I can't get a loan on my name alone. And these are systemic issues. And I'm today wondering whether I make an issue of it or not. I don't know. These entrepreneurs can't do anything about it. This is what is a systemic challenge. But I think one of us, we have to at least be aware of it and raise it and see where we can bring about these changes, right? The third thing I'd say is amplify the voices of other women leaders, trailblazers, builders, entrepreneurs, because as Sairi said, there are few of us, and we are the ones who should be amplifying these voices, and that's important because again, like you brought up, Anu, if you were to even ask me for names of 5 women scientists, and I read a lot, and I think about it, it's hard for me to come up with that, because in our textbooks we didn't have that, in media we don't have that. Women are not showcased as much as experts as men. So it is important that we amplify each other's voices, bring up these names actively. And the last thing I'd say, which I've been thinking a lot about, especially with young children as they are, building stuff, is helping them make their own decisions. I see even from very early age, we did a STEM study, where we were asking parents and children, how do they think about their careers and what role does STEM play in their decision? And we saw a very clear differentiation between how women were deciding or girls were deciding versus boys. Girls were depending a lot more on their parents' approval and decisions. And again, maybe it goes back to conditioning, but it is important that children learn that the process of decision making and decide for themselves whether they fail or succeed, or it's a good decision by its very nature is risky, right? That's why it is, you could fail, you could make a wrong decision, and therefore you wanted to make it for yourself. So for this generation of kids, and especially girls, it's important that we explain the power of decision making, whether it is financial decision, whether it is career decision, whether it is, the decision to speak up. Many a times it's not as if they're being forced to do it. It's just that it's more comfortable to say, okay, let someone else make the decision for me, right? Like, and again, Suchi mentioned that she might want to travel, she might not want to travel with the kid at home, but it's finally her decision. She has to speak up and say, look, doesn't work for me, right? So I think these are the 3 or 4 things: having the vocabulary, amplify other people's voices, speak up about it when you can, and realize the power of decision making and communicate it to the people who are in our circle of influence.
Great, Pooja. Thank you so much. That's a good summary of, what we need to be doing. And I think, we need to be celebrating the stories of women more. That's the thing that's completely absent in our culture. First we don't get the women, then we don't know their stories. And, only when we do that, we should really be able to play up, showcase, celebrate. And, I found a very, interesting voice from a completely different quarter. I was looking at Amar Chitra Katha, and they had this series on women scientists, and I hadn't even heard about any of them, and it's a pity, we don't know about women of our own generation, but obviously, like the first woman plant cytologist, the first woman PhD, the first woman engineer, and they had a beautiful series. So I think it's first about having those, second about promoting those. And, this had been a live conference. I have been happy to, distribute a bunch of these Amar Chitra Kathas on women to, all of the attendees, because that's kind of an interesting addition to the discussions that we are having today. So without much further ado, let's get to Sairi and, listen to her points of view on this.
Well, I think first I want to tell Pooja that, this bring your husband to sign and bring your husband's name or father's name is rampant. So we're building Mahila Money as a neobank for women. And one of the core founding USPs is that you don't need anybody from your family to take a loan or to, exercise a financial instrument. And you won't believe it, how this is so rampant. Like, I mean, it's part of the core product because, we spoke to women across, right? From women, in Koramangala to women sitting in Bardhanpur in Bengal. It's everywhere. So I think, and that brings me to, I think, in startups, they say 20% of your effort should be able to yield 80% of outcome. And I've come to believe that if we are not solving for top of the funnel, it's not going to distill down, and that only 2 things that move the needle. One is, money talks, and putting more money in hands of women, just investing more in women. And I think today as a country, India is not even looking at that. Like, if you were to put, let's say, more money in hands of women scientists, or to skill more women, or to support more women entrepreneurs, you know what? There's no anchor for that. You will go to 5 different ministries and they will say women is not our job, the women's ministry does it. But women's ministry doesn't look at this. So what I'm trying to say is we can't get anywhere without changing policy. If the policy maker doesn't know this and it's not a national priority, we're not going to get there. Second is just more access to money as entrepreneurial opportunities, income opportunities, access to grants, access to facilities. If I was to super simplify this, I would just say make it safe for women to live and put lots of money into the ecosystem. It will all turn around. And I think it's really important to make sure that the incentives are aligned. And I'll give you a small example. Like today, we know that our women in workforce is very poor, and the only grace today is that the number of women who are entrepreneurs is growing. It's such a good time for India to make incentives aligned for women entrepreneurs. And I think it can rapidly change things. Similarly, for STEM education or for STEM projects or women building tech, there's so much that you can create incentive structures around, and that moves the needle, right? Because it moves the mass market. And the truth is, this conversation is still it's a very privileged conversation. It's not reaching to women sitting in a small town in Gujarat or Bihar or elsewhere. And I think when we are thinking of this conversation, the truth is it's all connected. If she doesn't get the same level of access and empowerment, then we haven't done a good job. Or it's still going to remain small. The numbers are not going to add up. And I think for the numbers to increase, we have to optimize for top of the funnel in marketing parlance. And yeah, so that's really what I would say.
Thank you so much, Sari. This brings us to our concluding segment. So I'd like to focus on the action plan. What can we do to increase participation of women in STEM careers? How do we get women to stay in their careers? So for each of the panelists, I would like you to come up with solutions. Is it more exposure? Is it belief in yourself? Is it role models? Is it support and sisterhood? So I will I will point it to each of you and want you to come up with three things that you think you can go back to your homes, your offices, and your communities and start from today. So let's start with Damin.
Thanks, Anuradha. I'll start by saying the answer is all of the above. But if I just pick three, I think the ones that I feel most strongly about is firstly raising awareness. This means, the way I do it is by paying it forward, going back to my school, college, talking to women there and showing them that, the path is definitely one that you can tread on. The second is, I think, making work environments more welcoming. And more specifically, I think seeking out feedback from women and then enacting on it. So oftentimes, the feedback process is more like a checkbox. Have we done it? Have we not? And very often when it is a checkbox process, women don't voice out, just by nature of our personalities, we don't voice out, grievances that we have, especially if we've done it in the past and nothing has happened as a result of it. So, I'll give you a very quick example. When we do feedback at our workplace, I often find that if I ask, a male employee, they'll have a list of things that they'll give me. If as a female employee, I'll probably have to ask her about 3 times in 3 different ways before she opens up. And I think this is something we need to be cognizant of, is just because we're not getting feedback does not mean there isn't any. And I think the last thing is, and this is something that I would really, really like to iterate upon, and a lot of other panelists have touched on it as well, is recognize that men can be mentors too. In the discussion about women and women empowerment, we forget that we have a lot of allies that are willing to help us out. In fact, for me, most of my mentors are men. And even today, a lot of my mentors in the workplace, are my boss, the co-founders of the company. My dad has been a great mentor to me, alongside my mother, of course. But, it's important to acknowledge that you don't always have to seek out a female mentor. If you don't see women, seek out the male mentor that's willing to help you out as well.
Great points, Damini. Suchi, your top 3?
Yeah, well, look, I'll probably use a phrase, if you'll allow me, to explain what I think we need to do. So, we talk about diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And it's been compared to, getting invited to a party, that's diversity, being asked to dance, inclusion, and belonging is dancing like there's nobody there. So that's really the journey we want to see, right, for all of us. And for me, part of it is also about moving to that next level where, I am personally most irritated when someone asks me my views as a woman leader. I don't understand that. What's a woman leader? A leader is a leader. A view as a woman engineer. I don't get that either, because an engineer, again, is an engineer, right? So for me, it is about having men and women who understand this, supporting the cause, promoting the cause, increasing the understanding of this. But I don't think we can do it alone. I think we have to partner and we have to pick on the right things that will make a difference. I'm keeping it very short because I know we're out of time. But I think that's an important element that sometimes I think we lose out when we go into how do we make more women stay in STEM careers. I think we have to do it in an inclusive way and not create a separate channel for them. So I think I just want to bring that point up.
That makes sense, Suchi. Pooja, your top three?
Sure. So I loved that analogy, by the way, the party one. That was great. Um, so first, I'd say is we need to start early on this, and because of my work with children in innovation, robotics, I see that some of these thoughts processes start very very early. So we have to figure out as parents and as educators and schools to do these interventions early and not shy away from it, because as Sari was saying, until this funnel, we don't expand the funnel, and we'll have to expand it much more because of the natural problem of those three M's you talked about. It's not going anywhere, right? We are women, we will have children, and we want to be with our children, and so we have to account for that and really extend the funnel, and we have to start early and talking about these systemic interventions needed at an early age. Programs like Girls Who Code, etc., I think have made a tremendous difference in that area. Second is, however hard it might be, include the voice of women in decision making process. I hear it all the time that look, we want to, but there are no women. I mean, it's a funnel problem. We just can't find women. So all of these panels right now happening with only men there. I mean, I can't believe it that we don't have women. And we are talking about AI, which will encode all of the current biases going forward. And even while talking about the issues, if we can't find women to present their views, then how are we going to ensure that the solutions have their voices in it, right? So critical to make it a priority both for men and women and leaders actually in the company to have women in decision making roles. And third, I'm a strong believer of this, I'll repeat it again, which is amplify the voices of other women entrepreneurs, scientists, builders. I think a lot more needs to be done there, because pretty much at a inherently women don't speak about their accomplishments. Damini pointed at that, and there is enough studies to showcase that while applying for jobs, women don't apply if they don't check like 99% of the items, versus men will do it if they do less than 50%. So it's kind of just inherent in there. So it's important that that yes, we are privileged, we have we are coming from a privileged angle, but we make ourselves available to pay it forward and amplify the voices of other women who are trailblazers and who are making change happen.
Thank you for those comprehensive set of solutions. Sari, what are your concluding thoughts? Top three solutions.
Yeah. I think my top three solutions are, again, thinking of things that scale. So one is definitely policy. I would definitely think that we can't get there, especially to the numbers that we have. 500 million women and no policy. We're not going to get that. Second is building up more ecosystems. I think venture ecosystems, technology ecosystems, internet ecosystems, healthcare. I think ecosystems matter, and the truth is a lot of success that we see, whether it's industrial or technology, is because those ecosystems support them. Google is not Google outside of an ecosystem. Google is Google because there is an ecosystem that supports it. And third is aligning monetary incentives. Nothing works like magic. like monetary incentives. So, for example, if the government came out tomorrow with a policy that said women entrepreneurs building a business that goes from 1 crore to 5 crore don't have to pay GST, it would change again. Because no, it does because I mean, how did we get to software industry success? It happened because there were incentives. We need to do the same for women in tech and women investing and women building businesses and women in workforce, and see how the numbers change. See, because irrespective of all our biases, this is one bias nobody has. Monetary incentives work, and we need to leverage that here.
So that's a lovely point about incentives, Sari. Unfortunately, we might not have time to take questions. There are a few. We will respond to these later on LinkedIn or Twitter. So I'm going to conclude the panel by pointing out that each of you panelists gave some very, very interesting insights and suggestions. And I also want to highlight that when I reached out individually to each of you to ask you what drew you to the tech field, one said freedom, another said the thrill of solving problems, and for another it was the idea of providing capital access to women, and for another it was how the passion for solving puzzles, one translated into solving healthcare problems. So in each case, it started with a passion or a love for something. It was less about tech, more about the passion that drove you. So that passion has to be nurtured. And in addition to that, you need something else. So I'll come back to the first picture that I shared with all of you, the buffalo. The reason I put it up is because I want each one of us here to understand that one of the most important attributes that we need to survive as a woman in any profession is something that a buffalo teaches us: a thick skin, like the buffalo. So we need to retain that inner core of confidence, irrespective of what the surroundings are like. Cut out the surround sound. And good luck to all of us, and more power to women in tech. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Anu. It was a great conversation. Thanks, Davini. Thanks, Suchi.
Thank you.
Thanks, Irene.